Welcome back, folks. In this short video, I'm going to describe some of the basic features of the theory of Neo-Aristotelian virtue ethics, and in particular, we're going to treat it as a response to the problems that Williams offered in our last unit. So if you'll recall, it's Williams' argument that most modern moral theory creates this problem of alienation, this problem whereby we are alienated from at least our actions and maybe also our reasons and our values, depending on whether we're utilitarians or Kantians or something else. So assuming that there aren't ways out of these problems as offered by, say, Peter Railton, we might worry that the project of moral reasoning needs to be altered significantly to get around these problems. Now, one way of thinking about this problem is that this is a new problem and that actually it didn't exist until modern moral theory became the way that it was. One way of solving this problem is abandoning some of these newer conceptions of morality and returning to something like Neo-Aristotelian virtue ethics, which is a theory of moral character, or at least it's a theory of morality centered on character. But in order to make sense of that, we first have to figure out what it's like to have a character. You'll remember that Williams actually talks a bit about this in the thing that we read for last time. Integrity, for instance, is related to having a character. So by hypothesis, imagine that I say to you that you are a coward. Pop quiz, right? Is this a compliment or an insult? Anyone that knows what the word coward means, just descriptively, knows that it's a bad thing to be. But we might ask what it actually means to be called a coward, besides that it's a kind of pejorative. When I call you a coward, I'm not just saying that you did something cowardly, like you did one particular act which looks like you might be a coward. I'm saying something about you, not just your actions. I'm saying that you are a cowardly kind of person. You are a person worth calling a coward. I'm indicting a fact about your character, and to use the terms of art from virtue ethics, I'm suggesting that you possess a particular vice, and it's a part of who you are. And because cowardice is part of who you are in fact a coward. In order to figure out what this is like, we should definitely at least first start on what the idea of an act of cowardice is. So think for a second about what you think cowardice might be like. Imagine in your head some kind of an example from fiction of somebody doing something cowardly, or the kind of thing that a cowardly person would commonly do. While I was making this video, just by hypothesis, I opened up a little extra window and Googled the word cowardice and then clicked on the news link in Google to see stories that involved cowardice. Virtually all of them involved, well, politics first, but second involved somebody avoiding doing something, and they avoided doing it because it was either going to be really hard, it was easier to not do, and it might involve them being more comfortable rather than under some kind of threat. One of the kinds of cowardice that we talk about when we talk about politics is often somebody avoids some really difficult kind of political issue because they know it might, create a problem for their reelection or something like that. We might think of that as being cowardly if the issue was very, very important. Imagine that there is some kind of a person that does the cowardly act that you had in mind, not just on accident, but they do this particular kind of cowardly thing because of a fact about themselves. So what that might mean is this. So let's imagine that acts of cowardice are these cases where there's a thing that really you should do and you don't do it because doing it would be uncomfortable. So one way of thinking about the cowardly person is that the cowardly person is the kind of person who sees something like the avoidance of discomfort and takes that to be a really, really strong reason not to do something that is hard but very important. Usually you take that something is very important to do, like that's a strong reason for doing it. The cowardly person takes an alternative route. They see the avoidance of discomfort as being a overly strong reason to not do something. If you can imagine a person who takes as a strong reason the avoidance of discomfort, you are imagining a coward, or at least you're imagining a coward under the kind of description that Aristotle might want you to think about. This is in part what it's like to have a vice, is that there is a reason which you should think is a bad reason. You take it as a very good reason, and you act this way all the time, often without thinking, or if you think about it at all, it seems very determinative. So the coward in this case is somebody who, upon realizing that a particular path would be the one of least resistance, that they take it immediately, even if it's the case that the thing they're avoiding is very, very important. So if it's possible for somebody to be a coward, if it's possible for somebody to have a vice like cowardice, it's not just that there is a person who does this act that if we saw it, we'd say, oh, that's a cowardly act. Importantly, being a coward is more. It's about doing these cowardly acts. It's about doing them in a certain way. It's about doing them for a very specific set of reasons, and it's about doing them for a set of reasons which is central to your thinking, central who you are, forms part of a series of habits, habits that you don't need to think about, but even if you did think about them, you would think that they were justified in one way or another. This is what it's like to have vices. It's also what it's like to have bad judgment. Now, take your coward and flip them on their head. Imagine the opposite. Imagine that there exists a person that sees a thing which really needs to be done. They see that the thing is hard, maybe even dangerous, and then they do it anyway. They do it anyway, and they do it anyway very frequently. They do it as a matter of course, and they don't think about it very hard. They just do what needs to be done, even if there's a threat. You've just imagined a brave person, right? Like this is the attitude taken by a fireman when they look up into a burning building. The firefighter says, this is going to be very dangerous, but I need to do it anyway. Thinking that it's very dangerous is not a very good reason not to do this kind of thing. The goal then set by virtue ethics is easy to describe, right? Really, the job of the virtue ethicist is to act in such a way as to develop the virtuous character, a character that is brave and fair, generous, honest, kind, and a bunch of other things. There's this list of virtue language, which is very, very old in English and Latin and in Greek. The list of virtues is surprisingly resistant to change in the Western tradition, which some people take to be good evidence that the virtues exist. But above all, for the virtuous person is going to be a kind of judgment, a kind of good judgment about what it means to be any of these things and how you know when the right thing to do is run in bravely, and really when the right thing to do would be to run away, because sometimes it's not cowardly to run away, sometimes it's reckless to run in, and that turns out to be a different sort of vice. So the picture offered by Aristotle is really quite different from the picture offered by Kant and Mill, even though Kant and Mill have their own virtue theories, which work a little bit differently but still involve a lot of this virtue language. But the benefit of virtue ethics, if it works anyway, is that it allows for us to take moral reasons not just to be ours, but to take moral reasons as being an important part of us. There's no holding something above our character if moral reasons are just part of who we are. And in your next couple of readings, we'll try to take a look at what it's like to act following the principles of this theory. In the meantime, take care.